Yeah, and it goes back to not being too stuck on the final result.
Yeah.
And that makes you a better servant when you're collaborating with other artistic friends. Because like it doesn't have to be my style or my aesthetic. It's like, oh, I'm creating something totally new with you. How can I serve your vision?
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes back to yeah. So then there's ideation. Another word for this is generating. This is part where you're actually doing. It's when you start getting clarity on like, oh, this should be a poem. This should be a song.
Mm-hmm.
You get a little more clarity in your idea, and you're actually at the point where ideating basically means creating, but like in the action tense. So like, you know, as a fashion designer, you're actually sketching, you're actually draping, you're actually doing the pattern making. This is the part that people think of when they think of creating. Like they think it starts with the idea, but really it started when you just noticed a pattern in culture, or like you noticed something in conversation with a friend. And like when you get the idea, that's actually the second mode, or like the next mode, which is ideation.
Yeah, I feel like this is the fun part everyone glamorizes. This is the part that people are selling. This is what you think of when you think of like, you know, fashion designers or musicians or something, like in the studio, like, you know, sketching, and, you know, this is like the sexy part.
Yeah, so what would you say is the challenge with this part? Because I was actually going to say the challenge with ideating for me is like, the challenge with this phase is like, oh, there's so much inspiration, and that can be thrilling, but it can also feel, like you said, overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it like what helps me is not holding back, and just allowing myself to explore, and like maybe like my reference for like some kind of design project, or like totally like seemingly in different worlds. Like I remember one time I was inspired by like parasitic architecture, but also inspired by like chaos theory. It was like all over the place, but like I was enjoying it. I was having fun. And like I sketch in a very iterative way. So it's like and it's very kind of fast. So I'll do a sketch. And then I'm so in like the flow, I'll do another sketch like that's an iteration of that until it like just keeps changing and morphing. And sometimes like the sketches next to each other will look kind of totally different, but like I just see it as like playing and really letting loose. I feel like, because I feel like in this phase, you're so excited because you finally have a somewhat of a clear idea. It's a pressure to hold true to that and like impose the final project. Impose what the final product should be, and like kind of edit too soon. When I feel like it's more of something like letting go and like really allowing the process of the doing to like surprise you even more, and like even supersede your idea. Kanye is like someone I really look up to when it comes to that. Like for example, when he sonically, yeah, it's kind of genius how he thinks of like these sounds that are like have not been done. But like in one of his interviews, he was talking about whatever artist he's really resonating with, he'll like fly them in the studio and they'll just kind of have like a jam session and just really play around with any lyric, any type of sound. Like he'll have a starting concept, but by the time all of these people are done like playing in the studio, it's like something totally more monumental than he could have ever imagined. And like collaboration is like a really important part of like his process, and like drawing from other people's genius to create something special. And I feel like that's a good example of like surrendering to the process and not being too holding on too tightly to like what you envision. A good artist example of someone who is very like mindful and centered in the inspiration phase is Solange, because a lot of what she does, like the way I heard her in an interview talk about how she comes up with her choreography, and it's like very beautiful movements that she does like in her music videos and her performances, but it's kind of like very raw. It's like dances that are kind of like easy to follow along with even as like a regular person. That's what I love about her choreography. And a lot of the ideas she gets is like just her in her room dancing by herself or like dancing with friends.
Yeah.
And then that ends up being like an actual move in her song, in her music video. And like her video bends, like it's really literally a compilation of her dancing like in her room. But like it's very artistically edited or whatever. But that's a great example of kind of just being in tune with what interests you and like kind of letting it unfold in that way. Also Sade, like because she only does albums like, well, she hasn't done anything since 2010, but like even before that it would be like 7 or 8 years between her albums. And in one of her old interviews they were like, yeah, so like why does it take like 7-8 years for Sade to like release something new? And she was just like, didn't try to defend herself. She was just like, I only create art when I have something to say, It's like the rest of those years I'm living life, I'm being a mother.
Bold.
Yeah, I'm living life, I'm being a mother, facing heartbreak, getting healed, getting whole, and then eventually...
That's the epitome of listening.
Yeah, eventually like songs are written, but it's like I'm not rushing it. So I think she's a great example.
I feel like in my design program, going back to ideation and not editing too early, my teachers used to always say, stop thinking about the end goal, stop thinking about the end product, because it really is a distraction. And it
hinders you.
Yeah, it hinders you, and it can rob you of really allowing something more beautiful to happen by, letting spontaneous ideas forge the path for what you end up making, versus like being super boxed in, like it has to be a dress, It's just like, can it be shoes?
A jumpsuit?
Yeah, can it be something else? I remember this was like between foundation year and our first semester in fashion. We had our homework assignment. And I got this book on design development from the director, Fiona.
Mm-hmm.
And it just rocked my world. I was so happy because the book is basically taking all these different students' processes in their fashion collection and how they take it so far beyond just like secondary research where they're looking at other images. Like that's like extra, really. They're doing dance, they're doing photography, they're doing drawing, they're doing inking, they're doing screen printing, they're doing all these different things to inform, the silhouettes and the lines and the draping and the patterns of their garments. And so I was like, let me try this. I want to try this for my approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with this theme of shadows, which I love because it's super abstract and it can mean a lot of different things. And I remember I started taking photos of shadows I saw, and then I started making like ink blots, like Rorschach ink blots, because I was also researching like shadow aspects of the personality. And then that made me watch the movie The Black Swan, and then that was informing me. So then I was playing Moonlight Sonata to this video of me making more shadows and recording that, and then I went into the editing and like made basically a moving Rorschach image, and it was like really cool, and I got super like it's super
fun.
Yeah, it was super fun, but also like just immersing myself in the emotional aspect of it, and that like, and then drawing out of that and designing out of that, like really everything was just synchronized. And it paid off. Like my teacher could tell that my inspiration was very rich, because then when I came into the ideation phase, there was so much of it. Like I had so much to draw out. I was pulling stills from the video, I was pulling from the ink blots, I was pulling from the photos. Like it was just, that was such a good experience for me, because then that informed how I wanted every creative process to be moving forward from that. It was so much fun.
That's what I love about our schooling. Like they pushed us to like come up with our own type of process, not even just like look at a picture and draw. It's like, how can you like deconstruct and make this process your own? That reminds me of like this collection of like weavings I did like on the loom, and you know, it's like, okay, of course you do a weft and you do a warp, and it's like, okay, but I was like, how do I make some creative like hand woven patterns like with this? And then I hand spun the yarn myself, and that I was like researching a lot about like chaos theory, and I was like, how can I create chaos theory in my, like, how can I create chaos in my weaving process to make it unpredictable? And so I got some dice, and like there's like 4 treadles on the loom so that you can choose to like, and like every time you step on a treadle, it like raises a different layer of like the weft yarn, so like it changes up the pattern. And so you can do like 1 2 3 4 4 3 2 1 or something, but I was like, how do I mix it up? And so I was rolling dice, and like that's how I whatever number rolled, like that's what treadle I would lift.
I like that.
And so it was like a fun process. I ended up with some really kind of like funky looking wovens that I liked. But yeah, it's like, it's interesting. It was like some people could even call that inspiration phase, because it's like you're allowing yourself to be inspired by your own process. So it's like, that's another reason like these are modes and not not just stages. They go in and out.
Yeah. A big thing that's important in this phase is just being prolific and just like making, and because it's not just about early editing that's an issue. Sometimes early just not enough sort of data to work from, you know. Like if you're, let's say, going back to like fashion inspiration or something, right? Like if I only have, you know, 5 sketches that I did of some dresses, that's not, I can't work from that, you know. There needs to be more data for me to work from. And especially because I feel like sometimes those beginning, like let's say you're drawing and you have an idea for a certain scenery or something, or a landscape or whatever, sometimes like those initial ideas are just like, those are the throwaway ones, you know. Those are like, so that doesn't even count. That's just really just to warm up and get that out your system.
Putting your foot in the water.
And also sometimes we have subconsciously we're putting out things that we've seen, and so I feel like getting through that warm up phase of ideating and iterating is also like getting that accidental copying out the way, because you'll recognize it as soon as you see it, but you need to get it out your system first so that you can get past that and get to like, what are you actually saying in this? What is your essence, and not just something you saw on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that kind of clarifies what I took for you, what you were saying when you were like being too inspired. And I was like, I've never like felt that, but like, because for example, if like your mode is fashion, of course you sketch the dress, but it's like there's so much I would do, because like that's kind of like the culture of our education, before I would even sketch. Like for one of my collections, like Journey Through the Labyrinth, and this is kind of what you were saying with shadows, I was just really in my feelings a lot junior year, and I was like thinking already about like the possible kind of lostness or disillusionment I would have after graduating, even though it's kind of early. I wasn't even senior yearly yet. And so I was really, and then I was also just, that made me think of labyrinths. And I was really inspired by the image of like how the bony labyrinth looks. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And so I started from like kind of like painting a lot of just like undulating shapes. And I was also like in a men's tailoring class at the time, so I was learning how to make like really just sculptural drapes. And so I would like drape like this really sculpted bodice, and then I like learned this other textile technique where I was kind of making like these standing waves, like these sculptural things, and I was like just positioning it on like the body, the mannequin, in like really different ways, just to see how like these undulating shapes could look like in a sculptural sense. And then I did photos of that, and I did a bunch of photo editing and mirroring to get different shapes of that. And then from there, from all that draping, from all the photo editing, from all the sculpting, then that finally starting the sketching process. And like by the time I was in that mode, I was just like sketch, you know. It was like so many ideas. Especially when you're like manipulating what you sketch to make a new shape and see something new or turn it over. So it's like doing all of that, like coming up with your own like way of generating ideas after you even know what you're inspired by. It's like that in between. So it's like, for me, that is like inspiration, but you're right. It kind of is ideation.
Yeah.
So that's why I misunderstood you when you were like too much inspiration. Because for me, that fuels me. Like now I can sketch, I can pump out 50, 100 ideas. But yeah, that's why it's like such an elusive process to describe and articulate. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of what you were sharing with shadows in your ink blots.
I may have already said this, but super big thing is also just like intentionality is super important. Like you're doing all that iterating, and yes, kind of do your warm-ups, do your drills, maybe do like a timed goal. Like I'll just keep pumping out sketches for an hour, or do like a set amount goal. So maybe I'll do 500 drawings and then we'll reassess, right? Mm-hmm. But make it very intentional. And then once you have those 500 drawings, you know, picking out 100 and say, okay, this is closer to what I want to actually say. Mm-hmm. And then out of those 100, being like, okay, what stands out from these 100? How can I replicate this? How can I shift this in a way that's closer to what I'm trying to say? Yeah. And another reason that documentation and intentionality is so important is that you want to kind of like, you can start to begin testing and starting a feedback loop really quickly. So for example, when I was converting my van, mm-hmm. a really good thing that was helping me was making these sort of life-size prototypes out of like cardboard, just mm-hmm. so I can literally get just a feeling of the space. Because like drawings only go so far, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay, what does it actually feel like to be in a 6x3, you know, box? And that's, you know, cardboard mock-ups. It's quick, it's fast, it's cheap, and you know, stakes are low, but it gets to the point and it informs you in a really critical way. Yeah,
I remember this illustration class I was in, and he was like, not about illustrating in that stereotypical way. Like, mm-hmm. for example, fashion school, you learn to draw with like the 7 figures, and it's always this tall, slim woman. He was just like, F that woman, like we're not doing that. Like he would want us to make like weird proportions and then like sketch on top of that. Or he would be like, make this paper sculpture and then cut it up and like look at it in a different light and then sketch from that. But it was like, yeah, I just love being in an environment with people mm-hmm. inspiring you to like find your own way of even generating ideas for yourself. Yeah, not being formulaic about it. And it really is about being prolific and just allowing yourself. I call it like not holding back, not inhibiting yourself. In so many ways we can inhibit ourselves with like our creative process. When you're truly playing, like you'll know, because you're not letting go, you're not holding back. And if you're patient in your inspiration phase, when you're like gathering those ideas and like capturing them, writing them down, harnessing them, it's like it'll be so rich. So by the time you're in the phase where you're ideating and creating ideas, it's like you have such a full well to draw from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you do this more and go through this sort of process over and over again, you'll start to understand and recognize your own process more. Yeah. And it will kind of make things a little bit more clear for you. You'll be able to discern between sort of your tastes and your natural inclinations and your style, so to speak. And going back to like, I mean, this kind of touches on the lifestyle a little bit, but just taking breaks, because again, if you're putting out 50 beats a day or something, that is mental exercise. Creativity is mental work. It is. And you're going to get frustrated if you're pumping out stuff, you're trying different things, but then you're trying to immediately assess, immediately curate, like, what works, what doesn't. Edit it too soon. Yeah, it's just like, just take a break, literally sleep on it. Like, that is scientifically backed, that your brain needs to process all that and kind of synthesize all these different things that may have happened that you've gathered so far, come back to it, and for sure you'll have a new set of eyes to assess from. That's super important for anything. Yeah. I mean, that's super important for life. Yeah, it is.
said.
Another word could be application. Another word could be elaboration,
That
like
was one.
elaborating
I like that
an
one.
idea, which is
Manifesting,
finish,
no, that's a little
fine tuning when you're finally editing, making those final decisions.
Yeah, this looks like curating and finally making decisions, and
how will it be presented?
Yeah.
How are you going to deliver it and showcase it to the world or whoever?
Yeah.
So what's the hang up with this one? For me, it can be burnout. Because it's like I'm like ideation is like my favorite part, where I'm finally in the mode of just being prolific.
Favorite part.
Yeah. And then even though I care about the final thing, it's like kind of you get burnout. That's why, like you said, it's good to like chill and take breaks in between your ideating.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and then especially if you get out of beginner's mind and you allow yourself to kind of be in like rush yourself, it's like easy temptation to like impose what you think the final product should be, but like no, like there's still iteration that even happens in editing. Like I think that's super important. I know something that helps me is knowing that like God cares about the details. So for example, when I was working on my collection Metamorphose, the collection with like the body adaptable clothing that could like adjust to different women's body shapes, it's like the ideating is, and that was like yearly. We literally spent like 9 months on this collection. So it was just like after. And then the process was very unique because, before that I was just making abstract things, fit it on like a size 2 model, you take photos, you're done. But I had to like recruit like a pear-shaped model, like a more plus-size model, hourglass shape, like a slim model, and I had to drape each design on each of them to make sure that it was actually adapting. So it was like a really exhausting year. And then I'm not like the most technical designer. I'm more comfortable with the conceptual stuff and the abstract. But I did want to challenge myself in that way to learn how to like make real clothes for like real people before I like get my degree. So, but it was exhausting. Like, it was fun. I was learning a lot, but it was also like, by the time I got to the point where like the patterns were finalized, the fabrics were finalized, and it's time to sew like the final garments, it's like, choosing like what button finishing. It's like, I don't know, just finish it. But it's like, no, it should be, this technique needs to be used for that button because it's a lot cleaner than doing it on the machine and things like that. And then the packaging of it, like an example, like God gave me an idea to like make my hang tags like feel like it's like someone's reading it to you, like how to relate to the garment. So I made these like instructional hang tags. It was like, to make this adjust to you if you have like wider hips, do this or whatever. So it was like kind of interactive.
That's cool.
And like another example of that is like this designer I work for, you know her, she was all about being like environmentally friendly. She was super devout about it too. And so nothing was mass produced, everything was made bespoke, or we found a way for like a client would bring their clothes in and we would find a way to upcycle it, or upcycle is another word for like revamping it and making it new. And we would do that through like embroidery. One of my coworkers was like really good with embroidery. And then people liked it so much, we would start embroidering on our own sweaters that we carried. And like she had a series where she was doing like these animal embroideries. And so not only did she do that, but she was very thoughtful about that, delivering like this final product. And she's like, we're gonna embroider endangered animals who are endangered species, because that ties back to like her caring about
that's deep.
Yeah, that ties back to her caring about the environment and the trees
that's
and animals.
Full circle.
Yeah, and then she would take it a step further and write a handwritten hang tag about telling the customer about the animal that was embroidered, the endangered species that was embroidered on the sweater. Yeah. And I was just like, I love working for someone like with this level of like thoughtfulness and the details. And that's why like this is modes, and like when you've got the raw ideas, or you've even got the final ideas, but like, okay, the packaging part, going back to like, I still need to be inspired by Holy Spirit. And he'll give you like those moments of, I feel like that was genius how she executed that.
Yeah.
Those moments of genius where it's like, oh, I'm going to package it this way. So even in like the elaboration phase, it's still about listening and being centered and being guided by him.
Yeah, those questions are super important to ask, and because it's just like now this is game time, like this is Hail Mary.
Yeah, you can't be burnt out now. And like
Yeah.
that's something I've struggled with before. It's like, no, I got to finish this with the same level of passion as I started.
Yeah, and like someone like me who I was saying, sometimes there's too many ideas, or there's just a breadth of work from the ideation phase. When it comes to the curating and the editing, it's like, okay, let me remember what the mission is. Let me remember what the why is. Let me remember my audience and what they need, and how am I serving? You know what I mean? Because that's very different than just what looks cool and what looks pretty. It's like, what is actually needed and what is necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I relate to the near burnout too, especially for long-term projects.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like the feeling zine that I made, I mean, the inspiration took years, but then when I finally realized, okay, I'm making an actual book, I didn't really have like a set due date, it's just like, but I also knew I didn't want it to take super long, so I was like, I need to be obedient. But because I was doing that at the same time that I was converting my van and also like trying to move out and stuff, and like new job, it was just like, okay. And especially when you're doing stuff that's not super fun, so like it was cool making the illustrations for the book and originally writing it, but then having to do like grammar and like everything. I was like, and having to do like 5 rounds of that. It was just like, can we get this going, like wrap this up? And I think accountability was a major thing that helped me with that, because I sent it to you, I sent it to like my mom, I sent it to other people, where that kind of was like a reminder.
Did you get those edits done?
Yeah, like, is it done? Like, tell me how it went. Because when I get other people involved, I'm like, there's a sort of higher sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
But but again, when it's long term, like, it needs to be more sort of routine, and again, taking those breaks in the macro sense of your lifestyle.
And we'll talk about more of that in our creative health episode.
Yeah, that becomes more like more of a lifestyle conversation.
I like that you made me remember an example I wanted to mention, because we've been having a lot of like visual art fashion references, but my current day job, I'm a communications associate for an anti-human trafficking organization. And so I love writing, I love making things sound poetic and storytelling and all that stuff. And I even like editing. I like content editing. Content editing is when you're making stuff sound and flow good. I even like that. But like the final proofreading, and like we were, this is anti-human trafficking. Like if you use a stat, I just finished our annual report from 2020. And so the whole team had to like go over it. Yeah. And then our grant writer gave us she gave some really good edits, but it was like stuff I would have never noticed. Like, like this stat, and like how to conjugate this and all this types of stuff. And it's just like, this part is not fun. Like, I'm ready to get this thing to print. Very tedious. Yeah, I'm ready to get this thing to print, make sure the paper quality is good, and be done, so we can like ship these out. Yeah. Because I'm like, I literally like researched and like produced and wrote the whole thing. Yeah. Did the project management, curated the photos. It's like, I'm tired, but it's like, no, like this is your project. And like, just like when it is literally your own project, not for your job, it's like, you are the creative director, like
it's all on you.
Even our video, like our music video for this podcast, like coming up with the moves, the choreo, even cleaning it up, that's fun. But then, okay, how do we communicate that to our producer, our videographer, and like the storyboarding? I checked out. Like, good thing she had a little more education about that. She finished those stills, and
that's why it's nice to have a team. Because everything's not on one person.
What lens do you want to frame this part? It's like I like me. I just want to tell the videographer like what everything is best. But like, no, it's your vision. So
and he even wanted that. He's like, I want to serve you guys. I want I want to make your vision come true, and we love that. But it's also like that's work to do that. So it's really owning it.
I have definitely some examples of when I was burnout and like I allowed that burnout. Like when I was I think you know this, when I filmed my thesis collection,
Mm-hmm,
it was 2 different shoots.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I would just use some of the models I used as the fit models, even though I didn't, like, but they had some kids who, like, they were already thinking on that creative director level. They're like, no, we're going to do model castings, and then I'm going to choose my model in the photo shoot.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, they also had the privilege and the money to do that. But I was like, I ain't got time for that. I'm going to use these models. I'm gonna show them some poses. We're going to make it work.
Yeah.
I didn't really research the hair and makeup person. Like, the first person my roommate recommended, I was like, oh, like, let me use them, even though I didn't even look into, like, really their styles. Oh, it'll work. Like, it's lazy.
Yeah.
And then, like, the first photographer I thought of, I was like, yeah, it'll, you know, well, it, like, her style did kind of make sense, but, like, I didn't know how to create a proper shot list, a proper storyboard to, like, make sure we were aligned. So it's like, actually, her style would have worked.
Alignment.
Yeah, and then also,
she's a great photographer, but I remember you were saying, like, your personalities weren't really meshing.
Yeah,
and that's important too.
Also, once we were already starting the shoot, she was like, actually, I kind of like, there's some people you collaborate with and, like, they like to stick to their style. And there's some people, like, they're willing to, like, be malleable and, like, make something totally new that marries your style, your vision, and their style.
Yeah.
But she was more like, I like this frame. I like to shoot women this way. And it was really like, okay, I don't think this is best for the clothes to show, like, the details.
Yeah.
And then I worked with Prince, who was the videographer for our music video for this podcast. And it was a different world. It was like he instantly knew he understood my vision. He was like recommending shooting locations. We aligned on, like, the shot list. I learned how to make a proper story, even though I'm still getting better at, like, the video editing part. But, like, I had to, like, for me, it was just like the fact that I had to do a shoot over because my models were wrong, my photographer was wrong, my makeup artist was wrong. I had to do it again, and the next shoot was, like, so at peace. Because we were all, like, in sync. It was, like, that synergy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, editing is so... It's kind of, like, just beginning in a sense. Because, like, okay, like, all of this is for you. It's like, okay, how are you going to deliver to the world, though?
It's a different mindset.
Yeah, so it's not time to be burnt out.
Sometimes... I'm going to keep talking about this. But, again, going back to being super inspired. Being too inspired, so to speak. I think having wisdom to know what to do with that. So let's say something like this podcast or I'll take an embroidery video I did, right, where I wanted to do all the different things, and in a way it was focused. It was all embroidery, it was all sort of on theme, but I made so much and I didn't want to cut anything out. So what I should have done was just make several videos, but instead I just made, like, one really long video, and which is okay, that's a solution, but I think as a consumer of that, it would have made more sense to just make, like, have a little short series or something, because then now I'm missing out on, you know, viewers who don't have the attention span to watch, like, a 30-minute video on embroidery, you know what I mean? So, like, do not overlook presentation, and not just presentation in the obvious sense of, like, how does it look, but how is it packaged and how is it distributed?
The user experience.
Yeah, the user experience is key. That's, like, empathy is the cornerstone of design. And, like, you will hear that over and over again if you're in any design, anything.
Yeah.
You cannot overlook that.
Yeah, as someone who, like, my job before this, like, my first job out of fashion was, like, just freelance writing, and now that I'm, like, a full-time communications person, always writing. Like, my, you know, some of my supervisors, they have to remind me, like, oh, this is great, but, like, just remember to shorten. Like, how can you make it more concise? You know? And, like, as, like, the writing I do for myself, you know, more personal essays, more poetic, I can elaborate, but it's like, for this email, though, like, this for this campaign, for this Instagram caption, where they just need to know exactly what we do, exactly what our programs are about, with, like, 3-second, you know, attention span. It's like, you need to make this shorter. And it's like, I mean, also just the reality, like, I'm a one-person team right now. We don't have a communications team. So it's like I'm very prolific in the sense where I have to do all of this stuff, write all this stuff. It's like I don't have time to make everything perfectly concise. But it's like, it's so important, because what's the point of your job if your job is to kind of capture people's empathy with your organization, if, like, the way it's delivered to them is not feasible and it's not something they're actually going to consume. So that's why, editing, making things shorter, more concise is so important. I'm gonna say I feel like someone who is really good at fine tuning and like staying the long haul is Beyonce. I feel like when it comes to executing,
really?
yeah,
Yeah.
I have to give her that credit. Yeah. But yeah.
Do my research on Beyonce.
I'm just trying to think of like good examples for this phase, and
Yeah.
she's those details, that choreography, making things super clean.
Yeah, I wish Donald Glover was a better example, but he's not.
Yeah, he's more. Even Kanye is like my beautiful dark twisted fantasy album was a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since then, it's just been more and more raw.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're not gonna name fashion examples again. So, but I think writers, that's a good genre to like talk about editing, because it's literally
editing.
Yeah, literally proofreading.
Yeah.
Literally like arduous.
Yeah.
Or even the part of fashion we don't like, which is like the pattern making, the sample making, like
yeah.
All power to that. Like even like the cutting,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not gonna get too geeky about design right now. But
that's when you dream of like getting big and finally having a team where like you can hand off some of that stuff, so that you can stay in your lane of
you gotta
like
delegate,
being the visionary, and
using your strengths and not burning out.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to say, feedback is so important. Like back to like my job, working on the annual report for the nonprofit I work for. It was so valuable to me to have different people's perspectives on how they, even not just like the proofreading or the grammar, but like how would, like, one of my coworkers is like, she's spent a lot of time on the field overseas where our programs are, so she understands the women deeper than any of us have because she's lived there. And so she's like, oh, how would this woman perceive her story being written? So like tweaks in like ethical storytelling and things like that, and just getting other people's insight, getting like those fresh eyes on it, really expand your mind to like create something that's really not only complete and like well done, but like something that's holistic as well. So feedback is also super important.
Yeah, it's all about that perspective.
Yeah,
because we can be kind of just in our little box sometimes, in our little nook, and forget other approaches. And even so, like before and after completion, once you complete whatever project it is, not just I've been guilty of this, or you're just so tired by the time you get, like, for example, our thesis thing. By the time we got to putting our stuff in the gallery, I didn't even care.
Like, throwing it in the gallery.
Yeah, I didn't even care about the people there. I didn't care about people's reactions. I was literally just like, I can't wait till this is over. I want to go home. But it's just like, no, like, still be present, still, like, because that's part of it too. That's part of the process, and that will inform your other projects and your body of work, and you as an artist, as a person. So definitely be present for that. Be attuned to what your audience is saying, not necessarily to appease them, but just to know what kind of impact you're having, you know what I mean, and how you're serving and things like that.
Your marketing, all of that has to be like well thought out.
Yeah. So this is our like question that we left open-ended. What does it look like to, quote, master this process?
Honestly, for me, to never give up. To just never give up on creating, never give up on making things. And being obedient with the first part, being obedient with your
I like that.
Your inspiration, like doing something about it.
Yeah.
A lot of us have so many ideas. So many people are so inspired. They never do anything with it.
Yeah.
Because they're just caught up in the cog of like 9 to 5, raising kids is super important. Don't get me wrong. But like, you're doing a disservice to like not only yourself, but to God, because like that's something he wanted to like bless the earth with through you, that you're just missing because of some like practicality that might be masked as fear.
Yeah.
And just keep trying, because when you start the inspiration and you like don't stop, the ideation, the execution is gonna happen. And like if you keep doing that, you keep pursuing projects, you're naturally gonna get better at understanding your process. You're gonna get better at living a lifestyle that that keeps you balanced and healthy so you can create from a healthy place, that's spirit-led. Yeah, really just not giving up on it.
Yeah.
Because it is a lot. Creativity is a lot of energy. It's a lot of exertion. So I feel like that's the simplest way, like success metric.
That's like when my friend was over and we had our little, I was like, oh, you want to paint with me? He's like, sure. And we did it for like 2 hours. And he's like, I didn't realize painting took so much mental energy. And I was like, yeah, like it's not, I mean, it can be just random, but I think he's trying to feed off of my energy where I'm a lot more intentional.
Even like, painting something abstract takes a lot of intentionality.
Even more than figurative things. I think for me to answer this question, kind of two main things. I think one, for me personally, just having more boundaries, and really like owning those boundaries. So, like with inspiration, you know, like having a set inspiration and not going too crazy with ideation, but also, you know, being raw and vulnerable in it too. And then with implementation, boundaries again, and just like, what is a mission, what being direct and not over producing, because, you know, I don't want to let go of all my sort of babies, so to speak.
Yeah. You don't want to edit.
Yeah. And then in another way, when it comes to collaboration and working with others, I think it's really beautiful seeing artists or creatives who can seamlessly jump in at any one of these moments and not have to like, you not have to like have all this build up and sort of get in the zone and, you know, and have their own, like, you know, those people where it's like you want to collaborate with them, but they have this whole like, you know, 12-step Korean facial regimen. I mean, dramatic, but you know what I'm saying, where it's just like they can't just jump in, you know what I mean? They have to have this whole experience and like astral project, you know, and do these different things. And it's just like, I think I really respect people who can literally just jump in, see what is needed, and just serve and execute it and just be there for you. And I want to be that person as well, versus like being, I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to be like a high maintenance creative, you know what I mean? I want to just be grounded in being able to serve people and collaborate, because I think that's the most really just the most like synergistic and best way to work with others.
Yeah, and it goes back to not being too stuck on the final result.
Yeah.
And that makes you a better servant when you're collaborating with other artistic friends. Because like it doesn't have to be my style or my aesthetic. It's like, oh, I'm creating something totally new with you. How can I serve your vision?
Yeah.
So yeah, it goes back to that. But yeah.
That was thorough.
Yeah, that is the creative process by Bria and Kristen. Stay tuned for our creative health episode.
Yes, that's like the paired episode that goes with this. Super important. You can't listen to only one. Gotta listen to both.
Because how do you live a lifestyle to where you become someone who can do this?
Yeah. In
a way that you're not burnt out or like defeatist.
Yeah.
That's the plug. So yeah.
Yeah, you want to live and breathe this.
Yeah. That was intense. Yeah, that's hard to think.
Goal.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode.
You can check out the show notes and the description for anything we may have talked about in today's conversation.
And if you like what you heard, like, comment, or subscribe. And leave a review too.
Until next time, you guys. Grace and peace.